Hey everybody, welcome to episode 9 of our Silvertone T2 Egyptian radio. Let's start with our update. So what you'll see, excuse me, is that I have the two capacitors installed right here. Everything's soldered down where it needs to be. I've also got the transformer painted. I've shined up some of these cap cans, and we're going to take a look underneath, and then we're going to talk about what we're going to do next. So let me get that all set up and we shall return. Okay, so here's a look underneath. Nothing really prolific to talk about, except that we've reinstalled the capacitors. So here's the coin tube one. There's the red wire and the black wire all connected. And I decided not to disturb this tape deal yet, but I think I'm going to because I don't like this bare wire here. I've been thinking about this, and I'm probably thinking that this bare wire probably at some point was one of those rubberized wires that fell apart. So there probably was insulation on this at one time, and it's probably crumbled and fallen off. So I'm going to be replacing that section of wire just to keep it safe. I don't like this thing floating around like this. It's just bare. So that's what I'm going to do underneath. And then the next step for me is going to be to remove the tone control, which is right here. It's very dirty. You'll see the shaft here is rusted. So I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to clean it, lube it, make sure it works right. I've already measured it. It measures fine at 2 meg, I believe it is, if I'm doing this from memory. So that's going to be our next step. After that's all done, we're going to remount the tuning mechanism, which is really the part that I'm looking forward to for sure. So that's what we're going to do. Now, if you remember in the first episode when I took it apart, there were pieces of plastic or glass underneath the tuning condenser, and I couldn't understand why. Well, after giving it a lot of thought, I know why now, because the rubber grommets that were there were deteriorated, and someone stuck something under there to stop it from hitting the chassis and shorting out. So that's what happened there. But we're going to fix all that and make it right. So let me get the tuning cap process started to reinstall it, and we'll come back. All right, what we're doing here is we removed the tone control, which is right here. Let's see what the value is. See if we can get this to focus. In the right light. It says 2000 meg. So, anyway, taking this off, the shaft is pretty bad. All that held it in was a little C-clip right there, and pretty simple to take apart. So we're going to clean this shaft up, and the carbon doesn't look so bad here. I wish this thing would focus better. So the carbon looks pretty good. So we just need to clean that shaft up because it definitely was hard to turn. So let's do that. We'll be back. All right, to clean the shaft, what I did was I took a medicine bottle and I filled it up with some Evapo-Rust, and I put some tape on it, and I just have this thing just kind of sitting in there, not on the traces, just on the shaft. I'm going to let that soak up a little bit, get rid of that rust, and then I put the nuts and the bolts in here. So we're going to try that and see if it works. Never done it before. As long as I don't disturb the contacts here, I think I should be fine. So we're going to give it a shot. I'll let you know. Now we have our tuning capacitor assembly just placed on top of the chassis. And we want to check a few things before we start to mount anything. So first of all, we want to make sure we know where all the wires go. So if you reverse engineer when I took this thing apart, this wire right here goes to this bulb right there. So we know where that goes. We've got a couple of other wires. We know this wire was connected to nothing. We know that this wire right here goes under the chassis, which is going to be down here. We'll show you that later. And then we've got these two wires that come off the motor, and they have to go around here and also go under the chassis. Now I'm going to have to change these wires around because you could see the wires are pointing out this way, and they need to go that way. So I don't want to have any funny connections around this cap. But aside from that, I've got all the grommets as you saw. The unit is sitting on top of the grommets, and we're going to test it and make sure that the chassis is not shorting anywhere to that tuning cap. So let me put this down and we'll show you that. Alright, to help us prepare to mount the tuning assembly on the chassis, we have to replace the grommets. If you remember, all the grommets on this thing were rotten, falling apart, or missing. And if you remember, I found little pieces of plastic or glass and some hot tar all around these areas. So that tells me at some point these grommets failed,
and someone decided to just kind of shim them and insulate it rather than fix it. So that's explaining what's happening there. So I've got new grommets here. Here's one that goes directly to the tuning cap. Here's one here, and here's one here. And I'll show you what I used on eBay. It's a 188-piece rubber grommet kit. See if we can get rid of some of that glare. And when you open this thing up, the ones that we used are right here. 7/16. Okay, and it looks kind of like this. Okay, that's what we used, and we're going to check it and make sure it works. Okay, so that's our next step. While I'm under there, I'm also going to look and make sure all the wires that we need to reconnect are in the right places. Okay, and then lastly, on the bottom of the tuning cap, there's 3 wires that have to go down through these holes. So I'm going to extend those wires a little bit and just make sure that I can connect them when I get under there. Let's place the tuning capacitor on top of this chassis and see what it looks like, and see if we actually are properly isolating the tuning cap from the chassis. Let's do that. Alright, we're going to do a simple continuity test here. And what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to check our leads. Okay, good. And we're going to go from the tuning cap to the tuning cap. Good. Now we're going to go from the tuning cap to the chassis. Nothing. That's good. That means that the tuning capacitor assembly is not touching this chassis anywhere. We're going to want to check that again after we mount it. So, what's next? Let's talk about it. Okay, so what we're going to do next is I'm going to remove this. I'm going to prepare all the wires that I need to prepare to shoot up from underneath the chassis to connect all these things together. We're going to connect this to the chassis. We're going to make sure that it tests again positively, that it doesn't have contact. It's not shorting. And then we're going to get ready to do a power-up test, I think. I think we're going to be close. All right, so let me stop this here. I'll show you one more thing before we wrap up this video. Be right back. Okay, the last thing we need to do before we put the tuning condenser back on the radio is just prepare a couple of wires here. So there's 2 wires here that come out from under the chassis. They go to the motor. So we're going to replace those. We're going to put new cloth wire. So it kind of looks old, but it's going to be white, but it'll be cloth wire. I think I have a spool of it here somewhere. Here it is. And it kind of looks like that. So we're going to have 2 new lines shooting up here that's going to go to the motor. And then we have this one coming up from the chassis. This goes to the light bulb on top of the tuning condenser, which is used to do the pre-selects for the stations. And then we have one more wire here which comes up, which goes to the terminal strip here, which powers the whole motor itself. So we're going to replace all these wires, make sure that they're all good connections and all that good stuff. And then we're ready to put the tuning condenser back on. There's 3 wires that come out of the tuning condenser on the bottom, 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to replace those as well. They attach underneath. So what I'll do before I end this video is I'll replace this wire, and I'll replace these 2, and I'll replace this one. And we'll show you what that looks like. And then after that, we'll wrap up. And next episode, you will see the motor turning on this thing, hopefully. So let me get to work here. I did get some feedback from someone who said that, you know, typically you shouldn't say, I'm not going to show you this because you've done it before, and there's new people that are watching this thing. I'm simply just going to be replacing some wires, so there's really no magic involved there. Just have to make sure I trace them and know what they do. That's pretty simple. All right, let me get to it. One thing I'll show you is when I use a cloth wire like this, you know, the cloth always frays at the end. And what I like to do is just put a little piece of heat shrink tube on the end there, just to stop that from happening. And I'll do that for all the wires that I replace. There's another one. Just keeps it neat, and it makes it look a little bit better. Okay, let me go get these things soldered in. Okay, so these 2 wires have been replaced. I have them color-coded so I know where they go. One is red, one is brown, and the motor has very similar markings, so I know that. I decided not to replace this wire because underneath it connects into a terminal strip, which is also holding basically a wire resistor, right? And those things are very, very fragile. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So I decided not to disturb it. I did take my meter and do a continuity test, and the wire is fine, so it's not broken, so I can reuse it. And then this wire, I'm not going to touch as well because it does go under the chassis and connects to a pin on this tube socket right here. And I really don't want to mess with tube sockets on this thing, right? I don't want to touch any of that stuff. This wire, again, I've tested it and it works fine. I'll just need to clean up that terminal strip. Let me show you the flexible resistor that I was talking about that I don't want to mess with, just so you understand. Let me show you that. Okay, so you can see right there, that's the flexible resistor. Don't want to mess with those. I've had really, really bad experience with those on previous radios. They're just very fragile. And the wire that we're talking about goes right here. So we're okay to leave it alone. So at this stage, I think we're ready to end the episode. And when we come back in the next episode, we're going to have that tuning cap mounted. I remember I have to replace the wires that go underneath the tuning cap, and they come right here through this little plate. And there's one here, and there's one over here. So pretty simple to reconnect it. I'm just going to get all that ready. And when we come back next time, you'll see it mounted. All right, everybody. I hope everybody's well. Hope you're enjoying your President's Day. And we'll see you soon.